thanks a lot for speaking with us today. Really appreciate your time.
Good to be with you, David.
Now, you are a man who wears many hats. You are a former CEO. You're currently a business professor at the Harvard Business School. You're a best-selling author, an international speaker. The question I have for you is, what do you get out of each of those?
Personal growth. I've always felt like life is a long journey as you grow as a human being, as you grow as a leader. And each one of those environments are helping me gain a better understanding of the world, and more importantly, gain a better understanding of myself and where I fit in the world. And hopefully enables me to interact with people in a wide variety of settings more effectively and more authentically.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were a kid, did you have any inkling as to where you'd be today?
I actually did, and I had a friend who said, close friend who said, don't tell people that, scare them off. But probably as my father planted my brain back when I was like 7 or 8, I ought to be head of a major company. Mm. But I remember being very frustrated in my teenage years about not knowing what I wanted to do. But it all kind of came to me when I went off to college, and I wanted to be a values-centered leader of a major company, could look at the leveraging power of business to really make a difference in the world in a very positive sense. I'm a great believer in free enterprise, and I think that used well, it can have a very positive effect on human beings and on society, in addition to the wealth creation and the job provision kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I think, unfortunately, capitalism might taint it because we learned the hard way. I think we knew it all along, that capitalism had its extremes of self-destruct. Mm-hmm. We saw that with Enron. We saw it in the fall of 2008 with Wall Street. Capitalism left to its devices with no rules of the road and will self-destruct. Mm-hmm. Sad to say, but that's exactly what happens.
And you mentioned authentic leadership, and I know in your new book, 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis, one of the things you talk about is that the recent economic crisis was not necessarily as a result or caused by subprime mortgages or credit default swaps, but in fact by the absence of true leadership, what you call in your first critically acclaimed book, True North.
Well, yes, it's caused by subprime leadership, or better said, leaders who practice short-termism. Mm-hmm. We learned that the economists have grossly misled us. We knew it all along, but a lot of people bought into their lines, to the Milton Friedman lines about maximizing shareholder value, which devolved, thanks to the stock market, into maximizing short-term shareholder value, which I would make the claim that any company that believes its mission is to maximize short-term shareholder value will destroy the shareholder value it creates. Mm-hmm. The only way, if you're a privately held company or you're a publicly held company, to create long-term value for your shareholders is by having superior products and services for your customers. Mm-hmm. Short of that, you're out of business and you destroy all the value you created. Witness number 1, General Motors, 5 decades of short-term management destroyed one of the world's great franchises. Mm-hmm. Went bankrupt. We all know the examples, but my favorite example on Wall Street is Citibank, which during my growing up years was the world's most powerful bank and trained tremendous talent back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and now it's self-destructed and went bankrupt.
Now, how do you Wall Street has, I think a lot of people would say that Wall Street has turned corporations into the short-term view, or they forced corporations into the short-term corner with quarterly profit expectations.
Right.
And it's a force to be reckoned with. It almost seems irreversible. How do you transcend that? How do you become an authentic leader, as you talk about in True North and 7 Lessons? Where do you derive the power as an individual leader to overcome that?
Well, first of all, if you play Wall Street's game, you will destroy your company. Mm-hmm. The example that I gave, I could add on lots more, like Sears, Roebuck, and AT&T, and lots of smaller companies, Kmart, but I can go on and on. A lot of the U.S. pharmaceuticals came very close to self-destruction by playing Wall Street's game. Bristol Myers Squibb used to be a great company, American-owned products, now called Wyatt, self-destructed. Kaiser was right on the brink until he changed CEOs and brought in Jeff Campbell. And I can think lots of smaller companies too, but these are more visible examples.
Mm-hmm.
I think real leaders, genuine leaders, recognize that it takes a long time to build a franchise, and that particularly if you're a hired leader as I was, and didn't start your own company, then you're really standing on the shoulders of people that did create it, and your job is to build that franchise. And if you don't play the long-term game, if you play the short-term game, you can't have a franchise. You certainly can't create new locomotives or drugs or semiconductors or automobiles or even a retail franchise like Walmart or Target. That takes decades to do. And it's your job to build that long-term franchise.
So how do you do it when the pressure's so great to play Wall Street's game?
Just don't play it. Just say no. We are in the business of creating long-term shareholder value. A great example of that is Sam Palmisano, who just stood in the face of that and said, no, we're going to rebuild IBM. He's actually the guy that's rebuilt IBM. Gerstner saved it, but Palmisano's guy built it. And he said, it's going to take me 7, maybe 10 years to change the culture of IBM to get us shifted to a long-term firm that's run by values, shifted the entire firm to leading by values away from the task orientation. It takes a long time. When you got 340,000 employees, now he's got 400,000. And he's done a brilliant job of doing that. The stock was flat for 5 years, went down. But he had the courage of his convictions and stayed the course, and I think that's very, very much his credit.
Now, you've been credited yourself with being an authentic leader, and I have to say, in reading 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis, your new book coming out, I was struck by, and hearing you talk at the World Business Forum in New York in October of this year, I was struck by how transparent you were, almost vulnerable. And if I could just read a couple of excerpts from your book and follow it up with a question. On page 34, you talk about rejection by my peers has been my great fear. In junior high and high school, I felt rejected by the in crowd as not being cool enough. This was my problem, as my need to be accepted and recognized got in the way of building genuine relationships. Until I confronted these fears, I could not move forward with my positive vision. When I faced up to them, I found they dissipated, enabling me to focus my energy on realizing success. End quote. Incredibly honest and vulnerable. And you go on a couple pages later to talk about the importance of having at least one person in your life as a sounding board. And you continue, quote, this person cannot help you if you share only parts of your story or protect your vulnerabilities. By knowing you intimately, he or she can help you discover your blind spots or point out what you were overlooking. If you don't have any, and this is incredible when you write, if you don't have anyone in your life with whom you can be completely open, I suggest consulting a professional counselor or therapist. And these vignettes continue throughout your book, something you wouldn't necessarily expect from somebody who has reached the heights of success that you have, and a former CEO of a large and successful company. My question is, does it make you even a little uncomfortable to talk about that?
Sure. Particularly if I think they're all laughing at me out there, all the people with power say, what a joke this guy is. Of course it makes me uncomfortable. But I think at the core, David, vulnerability is power. Unwillingness to be vulnerable is weakness. Dick Foles was unwilling to be vulnerable, and he destroyed Lehman Brothers. Had he been more vulnerable, he might have saved them. But I can, this is true for all of us. It's true for my students. Write about their vulnerabilities in the various crucible of their lives, and they find great power in that after they do it. But it's really hard to write about. Some of them send me their papers all taped up and everything because they're ashamed of what happened. If you live your life with shame, trying to avoid further shame, you'll find you won't be effective as a leader. I know people that were abused as children, and they never face up to that, and they feel like, gosh, I'm the only person it's ever happened to, and so I'm angry at the world, and I don't trust anyone, and, I don't trust people of the opposite sex, and on and on and on, And it's really tragic because they haven't really faced up to it themselves. And so they're limited, and they may actually use their anger to fuel aggression, like people like Hank Greenberg and Sandy Weill did. But the problem with that anger is it takes you to a level of success, but then it pushes you over the brink, and eventually you self-destruct, as does your enterprise if you have the power.